Hi everybody, so today we're going to be looking at another fundamental of After Effects. It's something we've looked at a little bit already, and we're going to look at it in more detail, which is creating masks through just basic masks, rotoscoping, roto-brushing, color keying, that sort of thing. Okay, so first of all, what is a mask? How do they work in After Effects? Well, let's make a start. We're going to make a new composition. I'm going to go 1920 by 1080. Okay, you can kind of just watch along for this one. You don't have to follow along because this one's very just basic elementary stuff. So this is me explaining it. But if you want to follow on, please do. Okay, so my background color is going to be white, and there's my 1920 by 1080 HD composition. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is go to Layer and New Solid. I'm going to choose red. Red looks good. So here's our layer. Okay, if I turn the layer off with that eye, for example, just to sort of be clear, this is the white background, so that's not a layer, that's just the background on my composition, and I can take that background away by clicking this button, and now it's going to just be transparent. So that's a transparent background, so anything I put on this will now be transparent overlaid on something else. Okay, take it up to full res because we're not doing anything particularly hectic. So what we're going to do then, I'm going to turn this back on now just so you can see what we're doing, and I'm going to turn on this red layer that we've just made. Okay, so masks come in different flavors. What we've got here is we've got two different tools that we can use for producing masks. So the first one is this tool where we can produce rectangles, ellipses, and so on and so on. Okay, so let's choose a rectangle, and we're just going to choose our rectangle in here, and so like that. Okay. So what's happened here, hopefully you can kind of see what's happened, is that our red solid has now been reduced to this mask. So basically what's happened is the mask has cut out all of the red solid that's outside this little marquee that we've made, and it's just kept the bit inside, which is fine. If I want to go the other way, I can come onto this and I can click Invert. And now it's cut the hole in the red solid and I can see the background through it. Yeah. So whereas previously it was, this is my solid, that's my white background, I can take the background off, so now it's just a red solid on transparent. Now if I invert it, that's a hole in this solid with a transparent background that I could then conceivably put something else underneath so we'd be able to see it. Okay. Just as a sort of an example of what I'm talking about then, let's go into something like this room footage that we've used previously. Okay, and I've dragged that down over the top. Now we can see that footage on the top at the moment. If we drag that underneath our red solid, we can now see that footage underneath. Yeah, or we can invert it and there's our solid. Okay, so get rid of that. So basically what happens is when you want to kind of when you've created a mask and you want to start kind of working with it, then you can open up your solid in those properties here, and then in masks you'll find all the masks that you've made. Okay, so with this one, I'm going to invert that, and we're going to try a different type of mask. Now, if you, I'm going to go with an ellipse tool. If you don't highlight a clip and you draw a mask, you'll end up with these tools at the top, and it'll assume that you're trying to create a different coloured shape. So if I select a blue, for example, then draw that, it's now going to create a circular blue solid. So it just, if you know you want a circular blue solid, you don't have to create a solid layer and then cut that out. You can just create it doing that, okay? And it creates that shape layer. But anyway, let's take that away for now. Let's click on the red solid and let's create a circle. So you can create just an ellipse shape, or by holding down Shift, you can create a perfect circle, okay? But wait, neither of these masks have actually done anything. Well, that's because you've got to tell them what to do. The first one will assume you want it cutting out and it'll do it for you, and you've got to kind of invert it or whatever. But these two, it's like, yeah, you create a mask, but what do you want to do with it? So what we're going to do now, here's mask number 2 that we've just made, and you'll notice the colours correspond to the colours of the marquees, the beziers that you've made. And I'm going to go into here and select Subtract, and now it's taken the piece out of the solid, and I'm going to select Subtract again, and there we are. Okay, so these are your sort of basic mask shapes. Okay, the other thing you can do though is you can use the pen tool, and the pen tool is one you may have already come across and other things as well. So you can create more complicated shapes with the pen tool. Okay, and then I can go into that and I can go Subtract like so, or I can go into I can use my pen tool to create kind of curved vertices, so I can make 2 points. And if I click here and then don't release my mouse and drag, then I can start to bend this bezier. Okay, and now I can click on these handles and I can kind of adjust that. But the best thing to do is to make your shape first, like so. So keep clicking around. You can create this sort of abstract shapes. Okay, and then you can come in and you can adjust these handles, like so. You're going to click on there. It's usually a good idea to click away from your pen tool. You can do it with the pen tool as well, but you sometimes end up creating more marks. So I'm going to click on this node here, and I can adjust that one like that. Now what you'll notice, of course, is that when you're adjusting these, both handles will turn proportionally, so you end up adjusting values on both sides of the node. If you hold down Shift, Shift does it by like 45-degree increments, so you can go to 45 degrees, 90, and so on and so on. Okay, and if you hold down Command, you get this open triangle mark, and then you can just adjust a single handle by itself. Okay, like so. So these handles take a little bit of practice, to be honest, to get used to how they operate, but it is a very quick learning curve, and it won't be long before you've really mastered it. Okay, you can also I just did that without explaining it. You can also, when you've got it in this state, you can click on any of these nodes and you can move the whole node around as well if you want to. Okay, I'll come on to that again in a minute because we're going to animate that. Right, so here's what we're going to do then with that one. We've just created our shape. We're going to go into our mask and we're going to click subtract, and so there's our shape that we've just made. Right, so if you go into mask now, then you can also adjust properties of mask. So there's the mask path, we'll come back to that in a minute. Mask feather, where you can feather the edge of your mask. You can really feather it right out or whatever. Okay, or you can have a nice sharp edge. Mask opacity, we can say I don't want the mask to be fully like a complete hole or whatever. I want some of the original left or vice versa. Okay, and then mask expansion. Now mask expansion is a useful tool, but it's one of those ones where you kind of get into it when you're actually working in projects. So we'll be using mask expansion in a few weeks' time when we're creating the planets tool for the the planets tutorial for the rings around the ringed planet, for example. Right then, so what we're going to do now then is just animate these masks. Oh no, before that, there's a useful tool that I just want to show you, which is to do with feathering your mask. And it's this tool. If you hold down your mouse on the pen tool, then you come down to the bottom, here's your mask feather tool. And what you do is you hold the mask feather tool, you make a mark, and then you push it in. So this is you don't release it, you push it in. That's the mistake people often make, is when they wonder why it's not worked. And you click on it, and all it does, it moves around. It doesn't actually create the feathering. So if you undo that, create the mark, don't release the mouse. Oops. Create the mark, don't release the mouse, and then drag it in. And you can see these dotted lines, and that's creating the edge of the feather. And what it means is you don't have to have an even feather all the way around. So I could say, I want it feathered that much there, but over here, I only want it to be feathered that much. You see what I mean? And so you can really kind of get into the more sort of specifics about how much you want your mask to be feathered, which is really useful when you're trying to sort of mask kind of loosely around a shape, particularly a shape that you've tracked, which is going to be one of the tutorials we're going to do later on. Okay, right then. So the final thing to look at for this first part of the tutorial then is just animating this. So at the moment this isn't doing anything. We can move along our timeline, nothing's happening. Okay, but if we were to for example, the first thing is obviously this is a solid layer, so we can undo transform, open up transform, and we can change the position of the whole layer if we want to, and we can adjust the scale and the rotation of it and do whatever it is we want to do with that. Okay, so you can control your mask by controlling the layer that it's on, or you can control the mask itself. So let's say we wanted this mask, let's say we wanted it to move along because whatever we're masking out has moved within the frame. So the first thing we can do is we can turn on the stopwatch for mask path. And as long as mask path is highlighted, we can either use our arrow keys to move our mask from side to side. Okay, so if we keep it there, for example, it's created a keyframe. And then if we were to move it to here, for example, and say, right, I want you to move to there, like so, then obviously our mask is now animated. Okay, if you want to be a bit more kind of want to use your mouse rather than the arrow keys, because you might be moving it quite a distance and it might take time, as long as mask path is highlighted, you can also grab any of these nodes and you can move your mask around like that. Okay. Now, a lot of people prefer using the arrow keys because what happens if you've got your arrow selected and then you click on your composition again, is that by picking up one of these nodes, you're now actually able to move that. So you might be wanting to move the whole mask and you end up just moving one of the nodes. You know, which is fine. It's easily undoable because you just go Command and Z and then it undoes it. Okay, but it's just one of those things that if you want to move the whole thing, just make sure mask path is selected, and then you can pick the whole thing up and move it around, or you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. Okay, and so we can move our mask like so. But what we can also do is we can then, with mask path selected, we can then also create. Whoops! See, I've just done it. That's exactly what I've just done. You can click on it and then you can actually move the various nodes. So this is useful, for example, if you're, I don't know, you're masking a person, let's say, and they're extending an arm, you can change your mask to match the movement of that person. Okay, so you can see now what's happening is as we play it through, there's our mask moving from side to side. Our mask then expands. He says. There we go. Yeah, so it was expanding. It just was doing it very subtly. There we go. Yeah. There we go. So another quick tip when you're using masks is if you're trying to figure out where your mask goes and you've got lines all over the place and you can't see it, Shift, Command and H will allow you to see your composition without any of the lines on it, and so it allows you to sort of go, oh yeah, I can see I need to adjust my mask a little bit. So then Shift Command H brings it back, and then you can do your adjustments. You know, so there we are. The final thing, obviously, that you can also do is, let's say you've got your mask expansion on as well. So that's a key point there. I'm going to take that to there, and then my mask expansion, I'm going to just reduce the whole thing down, and that's not the feathering. If you notice, that's actually the edge of the mask. So what we've done now is we've got our mask. So our person, for example, has stopped and they're moving away, and we can use the mask expansion to just condense that mask around that person moving away, let's say. Okay, so that's elementary masks to begin with. Now let's start using those a little to do things that are a bit more interesting. Oh, and final thing, of course, is that with the mask path, you can adjust your speed graphs and things like that, which is something we're going to come on to in next week's tutorial.